West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
The fate of American politics for the next decade is being determined right now, in the next few months. What I mean by that is the redistricting process is already underway. State houses across the country are using the newly released 2020 census data to carve out congressional and state legislative districts that could cement political power for the next decade. And with the blessing of Chief Justice John Roberts' Supreme Court, which ruled in 2019 that federal judges do not have the power to step in and stop partisan gerrymandering, no matter how extreme, Republicans, who need to flip only 5 congressional seats to win back the House, can be as aggressive as they want to be on pure political grounds. Just a few days ago, the Republican chair of Hamilton County in Ohio, a guy named Alex Triantafilo, sent out a now-deleted tweet that read, "This won't be my most popular tweet, but Republicans should look out for Republicans when drawing the lines for apportionment. We won. Obama taught us elections have consequences. This is a red state. Treat it as such. Voters value a spine." See, it's not really about good legislation or convincing voters you'll make their lives better or anything like that. No, it's just about manipulation of the rules of the game.
We have everything working in our favor right now. We have redistricting coming up, and the Republicans control most of that process in most of the states around the country. That alone should get us the majority back.
That alone. Eric Holder is a former attorney general under President Barack Obama. He now serves as chairman of the National Democratic Redistricting Committee. And Mr. Holder, thank you so much for joining us on a very rough and dark, tragic day. I appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, this is a tough day. I mean, my heart breaks. The mission in Afghanistan was never one that was clearly defined. Nation building, perhaps not something we should have engaged in. But those young people, those young soldiers today who gave their lives or who were injured, had a very defined mission. They were trying to help people get to freedom, get Americans back to this country. And it's so my thoughts and prayers are with the people who survived the attack and with the relatives of those who died.
You've been working on this issue of gerrymandering for a while, and now's the time. And I'm not sure people realize what's happening right now. Can we just start at a basic factual level, just descriptively? Who's doing this? What the fate of the country is going to be figured out by people that are going to draw a bunch of maps. Who's drawing the maps, and how are they doing it?
It depends on the state. In most states, the state legislature will be drawing the lines. In some states, like in Colorado, Michigan now, Arizona, California, independent commissions will be drawing the lines. And that's why this is such an important thing. It's such an important thing to keep the public engaged in this process, especially where you've got the legislature involved in this, so that there is transparency, so that there is citizen involvement, so that people have the opportunity to see the maps that are being considered as they are being considered.
I think this is a really key point. If you've got a state with a Republican control, the one check is a public that's watching them. We use that Ohio official in the intro from Hamilton County. And there are hearings in Ohio, and Ohioans have actually been encouraged to go out to these hearings because there is essentially no check on what the Republicans in that state can do unless they show up. I want to play you a little bit of them showing up at these hearings and demanding transparency. Take a listen.
I'm here to describe how gerrymandering has diluted my vote and the votes of others.
When these districts are drawn, it have to be drawn in such a way that urban areas are represented in proportion to the population that resides in those urban areas.
Ohioans overwhelmingly support fair district rules for the state legislature, meaning we are saying with our voice and our vote that we will no longer live in congressional districts that are drawn to redline Ohio voters' choice.
Our great state cannot undertake another decade where a radical few have taken over the ability to create policy that impacts all of us.
Do you think public pressure works? Do you think it's effective and makes a difference in how these maps get made?
Well, I think it's interesting in Ohio that although they're holding these hearings are held during the day, during work hours, so they don't make it easy for people necessarily to get there. And then beyond that, they have not shared any of the maps at this point. The first maps have to be revealed on September the 1st, and nothing has been shared with the public at this point. And I do think that if you share maps, if the public has the opportunity, as those four citizens had the ability to get up there and talk about the principles that ought to undergird the redistricting process, if you share the maps with people, they will have the ability to comment. And Republicans know that. And that's why they don't want to share the bad maps that they're undoubtedly going to try to draw. Ohio is a kind of a Republican state, but they have a congressional delegation that is 12 Republicans, 4 Democrats. 75% of their congressional delegation is Republican. That is all as a result of gerrymandering. And that's the kind of thing that we have to protect against. And we need the people, the public, to be involved.
Yeah, that's amazing when it's 3/4 Republican in a state that, is probably a +8, +9 Republican state. What are the recourses? So you've got public transparency. You can petition your government. You can show up at these hearings. What are the other recourses here? I mean, one of the things of the For the People Act was to actually put some federal guidelines, create statutory processes by which you would have nonpartisan gerrymandering. That's not going to happen in time, it looks like. So what are the recourses here to make sure that we don't see this essentially anti-democratic, power grab?
Well, I'm not giving up on the For the People Act yet. I mean, it can be passed and can be passed relatively quickly, relatively soon. Most of the states will pass, about half the states will have their maps drawn by the end of the year, so that if you get Congress to pass that bill, get it to the president by the end of September, you can have an impact. And what's important about the bill is that it bans partisan gerrymandering in drawing lines for congressional districts. Beyond that, we will have the ability to file lawsuits. You're right. As in your intro, you said that the Supreme Court, I think, disastrously said that you can't bring these cases in federal court, but we can bring the cases in state courts using state constitutions. And we have been successful in bringing those cases in Pennsylvania, in Virginia, as well as in North Carolina. And so, we can bring cases based on racial gerrymandering, on the basis of partisan gerrymandering in state courts. You can bring racial gerrymandering cases in federal courts. And there's a congruence between racial gerrymandering and partisan gerrymandering. What is a racial gerrymander? They will now claim it to be nothing more than a partisan gerrymandering, given what the Supreme Court has said.
Yeah, and we should be clear here. I mean, the For the People Act, right, would essentially stop this kind of arms race. It's a symmetrical process, right? The For the People Act would say, because Democrats, right? I mean, this is Kathy Hochul today saying, do you plan to use your influence to help Democrats expand the House majority through the redistricting process? Yes, she says. I'm also the leader of the New York State Democratic Party. I embrace that. Now, there's a lot of people who think, look, you can't unilaterally disarm. I know you feel a little differently than that, but the whole point is, the For the People Act would take away that from both sides and would produce these independent commissions, which have worked well in places like Colorado and Iowa.
Yeah, it's I'm for fairness. And if the maps are drawn in a fair way, Democrats and progressives will do just fine. Now, in New York, we should follow the population trends. New York City, a Democratic component of New York State, has increased in population. The rural areas in New York State have lost population. And so if you're going to pull out a district, you're going to decrease the number of representatives, it probably ought to come from a rural area, which probably means a couple of Republican seats there.
It is Friday, the 27th of August of 2021, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner, the English Bulldog, is our snoozing sous chef, and our daily special is Blue Moon Spirits Fridays, because we are all night hawks in the diner of life. Yes, the French 77s are all virtually mixed and poured for your virtual imbibing pleasure, so please do. And if you do take care, because though it be a tasty spirit, it be potent as well. Okay, well, we're still in the throes of this suicide bombers attack here or over there in Afghanistan. This only seems like here. And it is a tragedy. Not unexpected, of course. The details are always, to be determined. But I'm surprised it didn't happen sooner. But, so I know everybody wants to assign blame right away and, fire some generals over it. Or impeach a president. Can you believe that? Yeah. Okay, well, I always want to remind folks that it was Trump who released the suicide bombers and 5,000 of their friends. Okay? I know there's a difference between Taliban and ISIS-K. Well, does Trump know the difference? He released people willy-nilly, closed down prisons, military bases. What was that all about? Drew down our forces to a skeleton crew and said, let that guy figure it out. If I'm not there, then he can figure it out, and everything's going to blow up in his face, and I'll be able to come back up into the Capitol. Have a parade down Pennsylvania Avenue atop a tank. Wouldn't that be fun? Okay, well, we avoided that spectacle, and now we have the one that unfolding in front of us, which is not, once again, unexpected. This guy, the former guy, knows all about poison pills. He's a businessman. He knows. Didn't he say that, if someone wronged him, he hits them back 10 times harder? This is his 10 times harder. But he's still a dimwit. And so are his sycophants, and so are his advisors. And I'm looking at you, Stephen Miller. In a just world, and I know that this isn't quite the just world that we would all hope it would be, especially when you consider the Roberts Court. But that's another story later on in the show. I know that we would wish for all this to be a just world, and in a just world, these people would be held accountable. Stephen Miller would stand in front of the Hague. I know we have laws against sending our people there, but still. And be tried for war crimes and crimes against humanity, along with some of his friends. Because in a just world, that is how it would work. But unfortunately, we don't live quite in the just world that we all hoped it would be. No. Independent judiciary doesn't mean that the Roberts Court gets to do whatever it wants in spite of the American public's wants and wishes. Even during a pandemic. God. Let's throw common sense right out the window because it might make the Democrats look good if we let them continue doing what they're doing. Okay. Shows the moral fortitude, the moral grounding that they have. when during a pandemic and people are dying, babies are dying, they would continue this power grab. It's much more important. And they probably still have it in their heads that it's only those people who are dying, so it's okay. All right. When, now this is going to sound cynical, all right? But let me just say that when little babies started dying of AIDS because of whatever, blood transfusions or whatever, then the American public started mobilizing and said, we got to do something about this. When it was only those guys who were dying, those people, it was perfectly okay for it to continue doing what it was doing. We need to rid the population of those people anyway. So when you're in a star chamber of 6 of the Roberts Court members, I don't think that sentiment is too far from their consideration. We had all hoped it would have been something a little bit different when the experiment started. But when you taint the test tube with slavery, greed, a lust for power, and pretty much ignorance as being supreme over knowledge, what are you going to get? Well, here we are. Yes, indeed, here we are. And since we're here, right here, why don't we go ahead and get into the curated part of the show? But before we do that, I was just reminded, I took a little foray into the town Facebook page. I get these notices every now and then, like, there's been 40 posts since you last looked at the Rogue River Facebook page. I'm all, well, yeah, I don't want to go there. It's a cesspool of, ignorance and greed, and lust for power, and white nationalism, and all the bad things that you would expect to be harbored in Southern Oregon, because it has a long history of it. So I thought, okay, well, maybe I will. So I'm scrolling down, and of course there's the Brit Festival. If you don't know what the Brit Festival is, it's like for British, I don't know, it started off as a British festival. It's called the Brit Festival. But they have a vaccine and mask mandate to attend. And of course that's riled up the people that go to Sturgis. They come back here and then infect people, and people are dying. We're having the spike that is so bad we have to have the National Guard. The National Guard is in the area helping the hospitals. My God. And they think it's all a conspiracy. They're going to put us in concentration camps because they're vaccine Nazis. And, of course, on this page, it's explicit. You're not supposed to have politics and, all this other stuff. So I was about to comment, and suddenly a pop-up said, be aware that if you comment, you might violate these standards that, spamming and bullying. And let me remind you that I have been suspended from Facebook for bullying people by using articles from the Smithsonian. That's bullying. Death threats, really vile, sexist, homophobic, racist memes directed at me. That's not bullying. That's not harassment. But using peer-reviewed scientific articles, historical documents from the Smithsonian, for instance, that is considered bullying, and Facebook would suspend me, so the algorithm got me. Let's just put it that way. So when that popped up, I went, well, is this really worth it to go through this again? And, of course, it says all the way on the bottom, and it looks like it's who I call the idiot admin. I'm sorry, he's a young guy. Young guy in his 40s. I'm sorry, we're old now. And I don't know. He attends to these situations a little bit differently than I would, but that's because he harbors sentiments against the police, anti-authoritarian, secessionist at heart. You know, all the normal sorts of things you would expect here in Southern Oregon. Has a long history. So, and he's made it very clear that really, you know, just by dint of the fact about how people are attacked on that page, he will not countenance anything considered rational and liberal, especially when everything's blowing up on the page, because if you happen to have a countervailing opinion to the prevailing opinion of Nazis, they really want to take you away in so many words. And so I dared not say anything. But people were whining that, I'm never going to go there. And of course, in this town, this zip code is leading the state in infection rates and deaths. My little town, we only have 2,500 people. Think of that. It's almost like if this whole town was in Afghanistan right now, I would be a little bit concerned about who my fellow neighbors might be fighting for. You know it. Jeez. Anyway, we do have a curated part of the show, and they're going to keep thinking the way they think, and I think that maybe the rest of us ought to take care. Mask up. Keep washing your hands. That's a really big key one right there. Keep washing your hands. Don't touch your eyes. If you do, make sure you've just washed your hands. And stay away from people for a little bit, okay? Especially out in public, because around here, it seems like they're doing it on purpose. So I almost think that the hyperbolic bioterrorist is applying in a literal way now. If they don't care and they're doing it because it might change things, what is that? Well, on the rest of the menu here, and starting off at the top, there is a reason Republicans want to keep district maps away from the public, because the public might see them. and Eric Holder said if the public sees them, they might want to comment on it. There is a comment period, and they don't want that. Nope, they don't want people knowing about it. Okay. Same old, right? On the rest of the menu, a California GOP congresswoman voted against limiting hazardous chemicals following donations by companies using hazardous chemicals. Well, you would expect that, especially on the GOP side. Texas employers say anti-LGBTQ legislation is bad for business. Yeah, but the white Christian nationalists don't care. They want their way. And the conservative majority on the Supreme Court have ordered evictions to resume during the pandemic. Such common sense. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where YouTube suspended payments to Brazilian accounts over election disinformation. Okay, good. Now do it here. And Tunisia has banned at least 50 officials, politicians, and business people from travel since their president seized all governing powers last month. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, to the right of the page is the chat room link. And if you feel compelled to chat, go there. Kelly Lincoln is monitoring the chat room, and we thank Kelly for doing that and so much more. If you would then look across the page from that chat room link near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, all the way to the left, there is the link to our Patreon site. And this sounds like a broken record to those of you who have heard this before, I know. But I feel compelled, yes, almost obsessed, to continue, and so I will. If you would like to become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio, in fact, we would encourage it. We're asking you to. Please, if you could afford an espresso-type coffee drink, for instance, I wonder where we got that. Anyway, if you could afford something about that cost once a month and send it our way, buy two. If you could, we then are able to stretch those dollars beyond compare, even on the quantum level, because we leave no strange quark unstretched. And that allows us to pay our bills, and surprisingly, we found that when you pay your bills, they allow you to fly under the radar. I don't know if it's by accident. Sometimes I think it's by volition. Anyway, we fly under the radar, and we continue this powerhouse of resistance against the dark forces arrayed against democracy, mom, apple pie, baseball, and our American way of life, whatever that is. So we thank you for your generosity, and we'll thank those of you who may consider to do so in the future. Thank you. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, go to @NetrootsRadio on Twitter. Tom takes care of that and so much more. Thank you, Tom. And that's all true, too. Kelly and Tom do a lot behind the scenes, and we thank them for doing so. If you would like to follow me on Twitter, in fact, I encourage you to. Why? I don't know. It's ego. And by date of the fact that if you go to @JusticePutnam, I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Cuz about 10 minutes before showtime and get that posted on Twitter, linked up. And the show notes and links are very important, so go there. Check them out. It's where the real reportage is. And you could follow the show on Twitter @CookbookWest, and we would, well, totally encourage you to pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, and wherever podcasts can be found. Wherever. Maybe even under the sofa, under the cushions of the sofa. You might find a podcast there. Maybe. Okay, well, I guess we have no other choice but to delve into the DNA of the Republican Party. Yes, it's always about greed, self-interest, transactional. We have to keep reminding ourselves. I keep forgetting that if we do something good, they think that's bad. It's so astounding. There's something untoward about Hillary Clinton chartering all those flights to get the girls and women's groups out of Afghanistan on her own dime. There's something wrong with that. There's something evil. She must be doing something wrong. They can't believe that anybody would do it out of the goodness of their heart. Or maybe it is selfish. Good people like to have other good people around. How selfish is that? Okay. So they can't perceive or conceive of a world in which they don't have to cheat. They have to cheat because they are convinced we will cheat. And if we haven't cheated yet, sometime we will. And so they have to be prepared. And they are. So this first offering here comes out of the American Independent by the great Oliver Willis, by the way. Representative Kim Young, Repug of California. I add the Repug part. That's why you have to go to the show notes and links to get the real reportage. Okay, just saying. Anyway, she voted against legislation that would limit the use of harmful substances found in public water supplies across the country. After receiving campaign donations from companies who use the material or products that contain it. The donations listed in a July financial disclosure came from political action committees affiliated with ExxonMobil and Phillips 66 on June 30th and Honeywell International on May 28th. The substances, commonly referred to as PFAS, are man-made compounds. I am not going to pronounce the full monosyllabic supercalifragilisticexpialidocious name of this chemical. They're commonly known as PFAs, okay, or PFASs, and they are man-made compounds, and exposure to which the EPA says can result in, quote, adverse human health effects, end quote. The agency has said that PFAS have been found in drinking water near facilities that use the material. They are resistant to heat, water, and oil. They have been used in the industrial processes and for products like firefighting foams, nonstick cookware, and food packaging. I always stayed away from that Teflon stuff. Ew, heck. The PFAS Action Act of 2021, sponsored by Representative Debbie Dingell, seeks to designate them as hazardous substances, which would allow the government to regulate and limit their use. Well, on July 21st, Kim cast 2 procedural votes against the legislation and ultimately voted against its passage. According to data collected by the Environmental Working Group, several communities in California's 39th Congressional District, which Kim represents, were found to have high PFAS in their water supply, including the cities of my neck of the woods. And do I know it so well? And I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why they have high PFAS. These cities include Yorba Linda, Fullerton, Buena Park, La Habra Heights, Placentia, and others. Brea. It'd have to be Brea, too. Oh, well, of course, those areas are outside her congressional districts, apparently. But Yorba Linda, Placentia, Fullerton, Buena Park, and La Habra Heights. And those are the cities that she's representing. Now, I got to tell you, there's oil wells in people's backyards and their, 3-acre horse properties. If you got 3 acres, you might have, 10 of those pumps. Just saying. Yeah, so that's why. And do people drink the water from there? You better not. I'm just saying. Well, ExxonMobil, whose PAC donated $2,000 to Kim's campaign, has come under scrutiny in recent months for lobbying under the radar against PFAS regulations. A recent investigation found the company had used trade groups like the American Petroleum Institute and the American Chemistry Council to work against regulating efforts, with Senior Director of Federal Relations Keith McCoy admitting on a secretly recorded video, quote, "If lawmakers start talking about how this is ExxonMobil chemical and ExxonMobil is poisoning our waterways, the debate is pretty much over." I don't know if they talk like that, but I like to talk like that for them. After the investigation went public, and it was by a Greenpeace video, by the way, ExxonMobil released a statement noting that in some cases, officials worked with third parties to advocate for policies that are important to the industry. Really? They also claim that ExxonMobil does not manufacture PFAS, but uses firefighting foams containing the substances to put out particularly hazardous fires. Exxon is notably a member of the Western States Petroleum Association, which represents and lobbies on behalf of industry groups in California, as well as Arizona, Hawaii, Washington, Oregon, and Nevada, and soon in a backyard near you. should mention about the previous story that I did work in the area for a considerable time as a supervisor in exploration and production operations for Gulf oil. And our heavy oil, heavy tarry oil would go to get refined at Exxon. Pipe it on down. Yeah, I worked there for a while, and the tank farm, the little refinery that I was a supervisor at, is now a city park. It had been a Superfund site, and I was actually surprised that it became a park because I wouldn't want to walk around there with my kids. But apparently they cleaned it up quite well. I've been assured that it was attended to, and they had to dig deep. They pretty much had to because that operation had been in operation since, from the 1800s and 1900s. Just saying. Also had an argument with a friend one time that they didn't want to have windmills out on the East Coast near where they lived in upstate New York because they're so ugly, and all these like extremist liberals on the West Coast, they want to tell everybody what to do, and why don't they have some like why don't you have some like windmills on your coastline? And I had to remind him, well, actually we have oil derricks. It used to be worse. Now they like hide them on these man-made islands. So you look out there and go, oh, look at that palm tree. And you think, well, actually, that's an oil derrick. It looks like a palm tree, but it's really a pump right behind it going up and down, up and down. Okay, so this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Blue Moon Spirits Fridays, is by Casey Quinlan, also out of the American Independent. Texas employers and business organizations have signed a letter speaking out against anti-LGBTQ legislation introduced in the state this year. They expressed worry over how lawmakers' targeting of the rights of transgender youth would affect the company's ability to keep current workers in the state and persuade prospective employees to live there. The letter was signed by 55 members of the Texas Competes Coalition, organizations and companies which are a partnership of business leaders committed to a Texas that is economically vibrant and welcoming of all people, including lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender people, and whose members are united by the recognition of the business case for equality in our state and our communities, and a desire to keep Texas competitive and economically vibrant, according to its website. The letter reads in part, "We are concerned to see a resurgence of efforts to exclude transgender youth from full participation in their communities, to criminalize or ban best practice medical care that is proven to save lives, or to exclude LGBTQ people in a variety of other settings, including accessing health care, filling a prescription, or seeking legal representation." It adds, such legislation would send a message that is at odds with the Texas we know, and with our own efforts to attract and retain the best talent, and to compete for business. We will continue to oppose any unnecessary, divisive measures that would damage Texas's reputation and make our customers, our visitors, and our employees and their families feel unwelcome or unsafe. Apple, Facebook, Southwest Airlines, Unilever, Dell Technologies, Marriott International, and the Austin Chamber of Commerce are among the signatories of the letter. Sherman of the Associated Press brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. The Supreme Court's conservative majority, well, that's a nice way to put it, is allowing evictions to resume across the United States, and that's an even nicer way to put it. Sounds to me like they're ordering evictions. During hurricane season, too. Just reminding you. And they're blocking the Biden administration from enforcing a temporary ban that was put in place because of the coronavirus pandemic. The court's action ends protections for roughly 3.5 million people in the U.S. who said they faced eviction in the next 2 months, according to Census Bureau data from early August. The court said late Thursday, in an unsigned opinion, that the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, which reimposed the moratorium on August 3rd, lacked the authority to do so under federal law. Without explicit congressional authorization, the justices rejected the administration's arguments in support of the CDC's authority. If a federally imposed eviction moratorium is to continue, Congress must specifically authorize it, the court wrote. The 3 liberal justices dissented. Justice Stephen Breyer, writing for the 3, pointed to the increase in COVID-19 caused by the Delta variant as one of the reasons the court should have left the moratorium in place. The public interest strongly favors respecting the CDC's judgment at this moment, when over 90% of counties are experiencing high transmission rates, Breyer wrote. White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki said the administration was disappointed by the decision and said President Joe Biden is once again calling on all entities that can prevent evictions, from cities and states to local courts, landlords, cabinet agencies, to urgently act to prevent evictions. It was the second loss for the administration this week at the hands of the High Court's conservative majority. On Tuesday, the court effectively allowed the reinstatement of a Trump-era policy, forcing asylum seekers to wait in Mexico for their hearings. The new administration had tried to end the Remain in Mexico program, as it is informally known. On evictions, President Joe Biden acknowledged the legal headwinds the new moratorium would likely encounter, but Biden said that even with doubts about what courts would do, it was worth to try because it would buy at least a few weeks of time for the distribution of the $46.5 billion in rental assistance Congress had approved. Now, if only Republican counties would distribute that money, and they won't. Okay, let's go to our break, and when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. This week, Faster DC Cat, Kill Kill. Well, here we have it. James Gunn's The Suicide Squad, the writer of Slither, Scooby-Doo, and Tromeo and Juliet, the writer-director of Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy, brings to DC the movie-making magic that helped move Marvel to magnificence. And he's done it again. The Suicide Squad is funny, it's visually clever, it sucks you in, it even has a little heart, plus it nods to the theme that governments only care about power at the expense of the little people, and those little people will never be out of danger until they rise up, which I can dig. In structure, Gunn's Suicide Squad is pretty much a standard commando movie. A collection of misfit soldiers goes on a dangerous but necessary mission for an ultimately indifferent command. Things go wrong, and our anti-hero crews start dying off until this genre's equivalents of The Best Girl make it to the last chopper out. However, in a sort of hip ironic wink, Gunn really leans into the dying part. So many people die in Gunn's Suicide Squad in so many ways. Eviscerations, decapitations, immolations, brain succations, you name it, someone probably buys it like that. And almost all of these deaths are played for laughs. Yes, it's the return of our old friend, desensitized theater, which feeds a long-standing suspicion I've had. Marvel loves their characters, while the DCU people hate the intellectual property they're forced to monetize. They think their heroes are lame, one-dimensional, uninteresting boy and girl scouts. Whom do they love? They're villains. That's why they want so badly to have an evil Superman. That's why they shoehorned Harley Quinn, aka DC's Wolverine, into Birds of Prey, and why their best works are sick films like Joker and uncaring death fests like The Suicide Squad. So let's crack jokes about Peacemaker's helmet, about the Polka Dot Man's powers, and about all of the Weasel, because we're too cool for characters who do anything but kill and die. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. Catch up with us at take2moviereview.com and feed us back on our channel on YouTube.
This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
Pools, water parks, and other recreational water venues are popular places to relax and stay cool, but they can be sources of serious illness. Since 2000, nearly 500 outbreaks have been reported at recreational water venues in the U.S., resulting in over 27,000 illnesses and 8 deaths. Most were caused by parasites, bacteria, viruses, or certain chemicals in the water. Parents with young children who have diarrhea should not allow their children to swim or play in the water. In addition, bathers should check the inspection scores of pools and water parks and can conduct mini inspections using test strips before getting in the water. A few simple precautions can allow you to share the fun, not the germs. Thank you for joining us on A Minute of Health with CDC.
For the most accurate health information, visit cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
Do you follow Rule 11?
Listen up. This matters. I'm Louis Black, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute with ACLU attorney Bill Newman.
A federal district court judge in Michigan has ruled that 9 lawyers representing Donald Trump should be sanctioned for filing and litigating a lawsuit that asserted fraud in the 2020 presidential election. Fraud such as voting machines mysteriously being tampered with by a weird set of characters from Venezuela, and ballots being counted twice, and election totals being changed by hand, among other claims. The problem with these claims? There was no evidence to support any of them or any possible legal theory. The problem with the lawyers? They didn't bother to find out whether there was or could be any basis in fact or law for their claims. By failing their obligation of minimal due diligence, the judge found that the lawyers violated Federal Rule of Civil Procedure 11, which prohibits lawyers from saying things in court papers that they know are untrue or have no basis, as well as a federal law that prohibits frivolous claims and vexatious litigation. The ruling says that the lawyers will face investigations in their home states and possible disbarment, because while lawyers should zealously represent their clients, they should also act with integrity. And as the judge wrote, this case was never about fraud. It was about undermining people's faith in our democracy and debasing our judicial process to do so.
The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the American Civil Liberties Union, because freedom can't defend itself.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1921. That was the day that the Green Bay Packers football team received a charter from the American Professional Football Association. A year later, this would become the National Football League. The Green Bay Club had started up 2 years earlier. Its original sponsor was the Indian Packing Company in Green Bay, Wisconsin. They packaged canned meat. Meat packaging was a major industry in the Midwest during this era. Packing plants in Chicago, Kansas City, Iowa, and Wisconsin processed the cattle and pigs raised in the West as meat to feed the nation. Curly Lambeau was a shipping clerk for the company. He helped to organize a group of local players into a football team. Curly persuaded his boss to donate money for the uniforms. and it was there that the name Packers was born. When the Indian Packing Company fell on hard times, they were bought out by Acme, another packing company based in Chicago. So, for a brief moment, the Green Bay Packers, one of the staunchest rivals of the Chicago Bears, was actually owned by a Chicago company. Although Acme only owned the team for 1 year, the team nickname stuck. Lambeau was able to buy the team back. He went on to become the Packers coach, leading them to 6 championships. The Green Bay Packers are not the only American sports franchise that's name harkens back to a particular kind of labor. Another Wisconsin team, the Milwaukee Brewers baseball team, is a reference to that city's proud beer brewing tradition. In Big Ten sports, the Purdue Boilermakers and Nebraska Cornhuskers take to the gridiron each week with names that reflect the working traditions of the cities where the teams play ball.
Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Blue Moon Spirits Fridays, we are all Nighthawks in the Diner of Life. We always begin, weather from around the world, along the banks of the Rogue River and the Rogue River Valley of southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 59 degrees Fahrenheit, expecting a high of about 82 to 84, moderate temperatures for this area. Some clouds this morning will give way to generally sunny skies in the afternoon, with winds out of the north at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Clear skies tonight with lows in the mid-50s. Winds out of the northwest at 5 to 10. And mainly sunny skies tomorrow and on Sunday, with highs in the low 90s. How nice. Winds out of the north-northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Confirmed cases of coronavirus in the pandemic-denying Jackson County, in the southern part of Oregon, which is the pandemic-denying capital of the world. Confirmed cases have again spiked and now stand at 174,034, with 2 more deceased, and we now stand at 193. Wow, we're number 1. Grass pollen, though, is rated low right outside the window here in Rogue River proper. The air quality index, though we are in an air quality advisory, we are actually in the good range here right in the region at 50 parts per million, and the daytime UV index is high at 7. Barometric pressure is rising at 30.08 inches. Visibility is at 8 miles with partly cloudy conditions, of course, and humidity is at 93%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that are crowdsources from around the world, and we call that the Weather Underground. London is 66 and mostly cloudy. Paris is 72 and partly cloudy. Rome is 83 and partly cloudy. Kyiv is 73 and fair. Kabul is 79 and fair. Hong Kong is 75 and fair. Tokyo is 83 and partly cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 55 and clear. San Francisco, California is 60 degrees and sunny. And New York, New York is 88 degrees Fahrenheit with sunny conditions. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that are crowdsources from around the world. stat at Reuters brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. YouTube said it had suspended payments to content producers from 14 channels accused of spreading fake news about next year's election by the country's Federal Electoral Court, the TSE. Most of the channels offer regular full-throated support to President Bolsonaro, a far-right former army captain who has been sowing doubts about the credibility of next year's vote. The president is down in the polls after overseeing the world's second deadliest coronavirus outbreak and a weak economy. Last week, the Inspector General of Electoral Justice ordered YouTube, Twitch TV, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook to suspend payments to people and pages that were spreading disinformation about the Brazilian electoral system. In July, YouTube said it had removed videos from Bolsonaro's channel for spreading misinformation about the coronavirus outbreak, becoming the largest tech giant to pull his pandemic pronouncements. Last year, both Twitter and Facebook took down videos of Bolsonaro for breaching their terms of use after he made pronouncements that went against the recommendations of global public health experts.
Je te donne c'est mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer. Mes automnes, quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Even more anonymous staff at Reuters brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Tunisia has stopped at least 50 officials, politicians, and businessmen from traveling abroad since the president seized governing powers last month, Amnesty International said late yesterday, Thursday. President Kais Saied has made widespread use of arbitrary travel bans in Tunisia while bypassing the judiciary, it said, adding that the total number of people affected was likely far greater than the 50 cases it documented. The office of the president did not immediately respond to requests for comment. Saied said late on Monday he was indefinitely extending emergency measures he announced on July 25th that included removing the prime minister, freezing parliament, and lifting immunity of its members, moves his foes call a coup. While Saied's intervention appears to have widespread popular support and has not triggered a violent crackdown, it has thrust Tunisia into a constitutional crisis and cast doubt on its democratic gains since the 2011 revolution. He has said his actions are legal and were needed to save Tunisia from collapse, has denied he would become a dictator, and said restrictions on travel have only been used temporarily against those suspected of corruption or security threats. However, authorities have detained or put under house arrest several officials and politicians, while border police have prevented others from traveling, raising fears for the rights won in 2011. Anwar Ben-Shahed, a parliamentary member from the Attiyar party which backs Saied, was stopped as he was traveling to France on August 15th and later said in a tweet that the president's moves constituted a coup. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day and for the week, but you do know Netroots Radio broadcasts on, and we'll meet up on Monday for River City Hash Mondays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks, and we'll meet up here on Monday, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Appétit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair. T'embrasser les yeux ouverts, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.